Scarlett Lockhart's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around the handle of her favorite green coffee mug, the heat seeping through the ceramic and into her skin as Nicholas's words echoed in her mind. She had walked through the front door of their elegant suburban home 37 minutes ago, carefully balancing bags of groceries while removing her shoes with practiced grace. That's when she heard them, her husband's voice, followed by the unmistakable chorus of male laughter coming from the living room. "My wife only looks good one way, in the dark, when I can't see her." The words had sliced through her with surgical precision, leaving her frozen in the hallway, groceries clutched against her chest like a shield. For 15 years, Scarlett had been Mrs. Nicholas Lockhart, a title that had once filled her with pride, but now hung around her neck like an invisible chain. She remembered how she had fallen in love with his ambition, his confidence, the way he commanded attention in any room he entered. Back then, she had been Scarlett Reynolds, 22 years old, a promising literature student with dreams of becoming a writer, or perhaps teaching at a university. Her professors had praised her analytical essays, her emotionally resonant poetry, her ability to breathe life into fictional characters. Nicholas had been 30, already successful, already sure of the future he wanted. "You're too talented to waste your life grading papers," he had told her over dinner at an expensive restaurant where the menus had no prices. "A woman with your beauty and intelligence deserves more than that." More, as it turned out, meant less of herself and more of what he wanted her to be. In the kitchen now, Scarlett placed her mug on the marble countertop and stared at her reflection in the microwave door. At 37, she was still beautiful, striking even, with her long dark hair that fell in soft waves past her shoulders, bright blue eyes that could change from cerulean to steel depending on her mood, and a figure that she maintained through careful diet and exercise. Nicholas insisted on her appearance being immaculate. It was part of the package deal of being his wife. Perfect home, perfect clothes, perfect face. Yet somehow, according to him, she was only beautiful in the dark. The sound of Nicholas's study door opening sent her into automatic motion. She busied herself with dinner preparations, pulling vegetables from the refrigerator with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved with the muscle memory of thousands of similar evenings, chopping bell peppers into perfectly uniform pieces. "There you are," Nicholas said, his 6'2" frame filling the kitchen doorway. At 42, he remained handsome in that polished way that spoke of expensive haircuts and tailored suits. His dark hair was just beginning to gray at the temples, which he claimed made him look distinguished. "I didn't hear you come in. I just got back," she lied, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil beneath. "How was your meeting?" Nicholas loosened his tie, Italian silk, she knew without asking. "Productive. Thomas and the guys came back for drinks. They just left." He approached, placing a perfunctory kiss on her cheek. "What's for dinner?" "Grilled salmon with roasted vegetables," she answered, turning back to her cutting board. A safe answer. One of his approved meals. "Perfect. I'm going to shower." He paused at the doorway. "Wear that blue dress tonight. The one from Milan. The Davenports are coming over next week, and I want to make sure it still fits you." After he disappeared upstairs, Scarlett realized she had been holding her breath. She set down the knife and braced herself against the counter, allowing herself 10 seconds, 10 full seconds, of pure, unfiltered emotion. Then, like always, she packed it away, burying it deep beneath layers of practiced smiles and quiet compliance. That night, after Nicholas had fallen asleep, Scarlett lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The house was silent except for her husband's even breathing beside her. In the darkness, she allowed herself to remember who she had been before. The girl who had written poetry until dawn, who had once performed a dramatic reading that had brought her entire creative writing class to tears, who had danced with abandon at parties instead of standing gracefully by her husband's side, making appropriate small talk. She slipped out of bed with the stealth of someone who had perfected the art of moving without being noticed. In the bathroom, she closed the door before turning on the light, catching her reflection in the mirror. Her face, scrubbed clean of makeup, looked younger, more vulnerable. For years, she had avoided truly looking at herself, applying her makeup with technical precision, but never really seeing the woman beneath. "Who are you?" she whispered to her reflection, the words barely audible even in the small space. There was no answer, just the soft hum of the air conditioning cycling on. The next morning, Scarlett woke before Nicholas. She always did, ensuring his coffee was perfectly brewed, his breakfast prepared exactly as he liked it, his clothes laid out for the day. It was their routine, one that had evolved over the years until it felt less like choice and more like inevitability. "I have a business dinner tonight," Nicholas announced over breakfast, scrolling through emails on his phone. "Don't wait up." Scarlett nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief washing over her. An evening alone was a rare gift, hours unscripted and unmonitored. "Have a good day," she said, as he left, the words automatic, meaningless. After cleaning the breakfast dishes, she stood in the center of their immaculate living room, suddenly unsure what to do with herself. The house seemed to press in around her, every surface reflecting Nicholas's preferences, his taste, his life. Even the books on the shelves were for show, leather-bound classics that looked impressive but remained unread. On impulse, she climbed the stairs to the attic, a space Nicholas rarely entered. Tucked behind Christmas decorations and tax records in labeled boxes were 3 cardboard containers marked simply Scarlett College. She pulled them out with trembling hands, raising a cloud of dust that danced in the beams of light streaming through the small window. Inside the first box were notebooks, dozens of them, filled with her handwriting, poems, story fragments, journal entries. She opened one from her senior year, running her fingers over the words she had written at 21. A poem about transformation, about a woman who wakes one day to find she has become invisible. Tears blurred her vision as she read, recognizing the irony. She hadn't become invisible. She had made herself invisible, gradually erasing her own presence until she was nothing more than a reflection of Nicholas's expectations. In the second box, she found photographs. Scarlett on stage in a university production of A Streetcar Named Desire, her face alive with emotion as she performed. Scarlett with friends, laughing, her head thrown back in uninhibited joy. Scarlett at her graduation, flanked by proud parents who had passed away 3 years ago in a car accident, leaving her with no family except Nicholas. The third box contained letters, cards, mementos. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a quill pen, a graduation gift from her favorite professor, Dr. Eleanor Hayes. "For the stories you have yet to write," the accompanying card had read. Scarlett hadn't written a single story since becoming Mrs. Nicholas Lockhart. She slipped the necklace into her pocket and returned the boxes to their hiding place, her mind unusually clear, as if awakening from a long sleep. Back downstairs, she made herself a cup of tea and opened her laptop. Nicholas monitored their shared accounts, but she still had her old email address, one she had created in college and occasionally checked out of habit. Among the promotional emails and spam was a message from Claire Reynolds, her best friend from university who had moved across the country 5 years ago. They still exchanged holiday cards and occasional messages, their once close relationship another casualty of Scarlett's marriage. "Scarlett, I'm going to be in town next week for a conference. Would love to see you if you're free. It's been too long. Claire." The message was 3 days old. Scarlett's fingers hovered over the keyboard. A year ago, she might have politely declined, knowing Nicholas's subtle disdain for her old friends. 6 months ago, she might have asked his permission first. Today, with his words still echoing in her ears, she typed a simple response. "Claire, I would love to see you. When are you free? Scarlett." After sending the email, Scarlett found herself drawn to the local newspaper's website, scanning it without any particular purpose. A small advertisement caught her eye. Community theater auditions. No experience necessary. Just bring your courage. The production was The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams, a play she had studied and loved in college. Auditions were in 2 weeks. A strange feeling bloomed in her chest, something between terror and exhilaration. The thought of standing on a stage, of speaking words not her own yet making them hers, of becoming visible again. It seemed both impossible and inevitable. She closed the laptop quickly when she heard the front door open, shoving it under a couch pillow like a guilty teenager. But it was only the cleaning lady, Mrs. Patel, arriving for her weekly visit. "Good morning, Mrs. Lockhart," the older woman said with a warm smile. "You're home today?" "Yes," Scarlett replied, retrieving her laptop with a self-conscious laugh. "Just catching up on some things while my husband is at work." Mrs. Patel nodded, her eyes kind but knowing. She had worked for the Lockharts for 7 years and had witnessed the gradual diminishment of Scarlett's spirit. "My daughter is in a play at the community center," she said conversationally as she began dusting the living room. "She was so nervous at first, but now she loves it. Says it's the only place she can be herself." Scarlett felt a jolt of recognition. "What play is she in?" "The Glass Menagerie," Mrs. Patel replied. "Do you know it?" The coincidence seemed too perfect to be random, as if the universe were placing signposts on a path Scarlett hadn't even known she was walking. "I studied it in college," she said. "It's beautiful. You should come see it," Mrs. Patel suggested. "They need more people, too, for the next play. My daughter says the director, Miss Kendrick, is very nice." "Maybe I will," Scarlett said softly, more to herself than to Mrs. Patel. That afternoon, while Nicholas was still at work, Scarlett found herself driving to the community center, a plain brick building she had passed hundreds of times without really seeing. Inside, she could hear voices from the auditorium, lines from The Glass Menagerie being recited with varying degrees of skill and confidence. She slipped into the back row of seats, watching as a young woman on stage struggled through Amanda Wingfield's monologue about gentlemen callers. In the center of the front row sat an older woman with silver-streaked auburn hair piled in a messy bun atop her head. She wore a flowing purple scarf over a simple black top, her posture attentive but relaxed. "Thank you, Jessica," the woman said when the actress finished. "That was interesting. Remember what we discussed about Amanda's desperation being masked by her southern charm?" The director, for that's who she must be, made a few notes on her clipboard, then looked up, scanning the auditorium. Her gaze landed on Scarlett, and she tilted her head curiously. "Hello there. Are you here for the rehearsal?" All eyes turned to Scarlett, who felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "No, I'm just observing," she managed to say. "I hope that's all right." "Perfectly all right," the woman replied with a warm smile. "I'm Bridget Kendrick, the director. We can always use an audience, even at this rough stage." She checked her watch. "We're actually finishing up for today. Would you like to come down and say hello?" Before she could overthink it, Scarlett found herself walking down the aisle toward the stage. The actors were gathering their things, chatting casually with each other. It reminded her of her college days, the easy camaraderie of creative people working together. "I'm Scarlett," she introduced herself to Bridget. "Scarlett Lockhart. I studied literature in college." "Wonderful." Bridget's eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "Are you interested in theater, Scarlett?" "I was. Once." The words came out more wistfully than she intended. Bridget studied her face with the perceptive gaze of someone used to looking beyond surfaces. "Well, once can always become again. We're holding auditions for our next production in 2 weeks. Nothing fancy, just community theater. But it's a start, if you're looking for one." "What play is it?" Scarlett asked, though she already knew. "The Glass Menagerie, a beautiful piece about escape and illusion and guilt." Bridget handed her a flyer. "Think about it. No experience necessary. Just courage. Scarlett took the paper, folding it carefully and slipping it into her purse. Thank you. I will. As she drove home, her mind raced with possibilities and fears. Nicholas would never approve, of course. Community theater was precisely the sort of amateur endeavor he disdained. She could already hear his dismissive laugh, see the way his eyebrows would raise in that particular way that made her feel small and foolish. But for the first time in years, Scarlett found herself considering something radical, not telling Nicholas, creating a space in her life that was entirely her own, hidden from his judgment and control. The thought was both terrifying and intoxicating. When she arrived home, she checked the time. She had an hour before Nicholas would return from work. She went to their bedroom and stood before the full-length mirror, really looking at herself. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and spoke aloud. My name is Scarlett Lockhart, and I used to know who I was. Her reflection stared back, blue eyes bright with unshed tears, and something else, determination. Maybe it was time to find out who she could be, even if it had to happen in the shadows of Nicholas's words. Claire's response came that evening while Nicholas was at his business dinner. Tuesday, at 2 o'clock, at Riverside Cafe. Can't wait to see you, Scarlett replied immediately, confirming the meeting with a surge of nervous excitement. 5 days. 5 days until she would sit across from someone who knew her before she became Mrs. Nicholas Lockhart, before she had learned to make herself smaller to accommodate her husband's oversized presence in their shared life. The weekend passed in its usual choreographed routine. Brunch with Nicholas's colleagues on Saturday, where Scarlett smiled and nodded at appropriate intervals, while the men discussed business and the women discussed renovations, children, and the upcoming charity gala. Sunday was spent preparing for the Davenports' visit. Nicholas's potential new clients who would be coming for dinner on Wednesday evening. Remember, Gerald Davenport is old-fashioned, Nicholas instructed as they drove home from the grocery store, where Scarlett had carefully selected ingredients that would impress without appearing ostentatious. His wife follows his lead in everything. They're worth millions, and I need this contract. Scarlett nodded, understanding the unspoken directive. Be impressive, but not threatening. Intelligent, but not challenging. Attractive, but not distracting. She had perfected this balance years ago, calibrating herself to be exactly what Nicholas needed her to be in any given situation. I was thinking of making that salmon dish you like, she said, with the lemon butter sauce. Nicholas nodded approvingly. Perfect. And wear the navy dress, not the blue one. Navy is more trustworthy. He reached over and patted her knee, a gesture that once might have seemed affectionate, but now felt proprietary. You always know exactly what to do. That's why we work so well together. We don't work together, Scarlett thought suddenly. I work for you. The realization was so stark, so obvious, that she wondered how she had never articulated it to herself before. She turned to look out the window, afraid her face might betray her thoughts. Monday morning brought rain, heavy drops that streamed down the windows and turned the world into a blur of grays and blues. Nicholas left for work with his usual kiss on her cheek and reminder to call the dry cleaners about his suits. Alone in the house, Scarlett found herself drawn once again to the attic, to those boxes of her former self. This time, she brought one of the notebooks downstairs and sat at the kitchen table, reading her old poetry with a strange mix of sadness and pride. Some of it was predictably youthful and melodramatic, but other pieces showed genuine talent and insight. One poem in particular caught her attention, a piece about a bird that had lived so long in a cage that it had forgotten how to fly. After reading it 3 times, Scarlett closed the notebook and went to her laptop. She opened a blank document and positioned her fingers over the keyboard. For several minutes, she sat frozen, unable to type a single word. The blinking cursor seemed to mock her hesitation, her fear. Finally, she began to write, slowly at first, then with increasing speed and confidence. When she finished, she read over what she had written, a poem about a woman finding her voice after years of silence. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Something new, something created by the woman she was now, rather than the girl she had been. She saved the document in a folder labeled Household Budgets, knowing Nicholas would never look there, then closed her laptop with a strange sense of accomplishment. On Tuesday, Scarlett spent extra time on her appearance, applying her makeup with careful precision and selecting a soft green blouse that brought out the blue of her eyes. She told herself it was simply because she wanted to look nice for Claire, but deep down, she recognized a deeper truth. She was reclaiming something of herself through this small act of deliberate choice. The Riverside Cafe was busy when she arrived, filled with the lunch crowd's gentle hum of conversation. She spotted Claire immediately, her friend's curly red hair as vibrant and distinctive as ever. Claire waved enthusiastically, rising to embrace Scarlett as she approached the table. "Look at you!" Claire exclaimed, holding Scarlett at arm's length to examine her. "Still gorgeous as ever. How do you do it?" Scarlett laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her with its unfamiliarity. Careful diet, expensive creams, and the constant fear of disappointing my husband, she joked, then immediately regretted the flash of honesty as Claire's smile faltered. "You're kidding, right?" Claire asked as they sat down, her green eyes searching Scarlett's face. "Of course," Scarlett lied smoothly, opening her menu. "How's life in Seattle? You look wonderful." Claire allowed the subject change, launching into stories about her job as a curator at a modern art gallery, her recent divorce, and her newfound passion for rock climbing. Scarlett listened, fascinated by the contours of a life so different from her own. Messy, challenging, but vibrantly authentic. "Enough about me," Claire said finally, sipping her iced tea. "What's new with you? Still the perfect corporate wife?" There was no judgment in Claire's tone, only genuine curiosity, but Scarlett felt herself tense nonetheless. "Nicholas is doing very well," she replied automatically. "His investment firm has grown significantly this year." Claire raised an eyebrow. "I asked about you, Scar, not Nicholas." The nickname, unused for years, sent a ripple of emotion through Scarlett. It belonged to a different version of herself, the one who had stayed up all night discussing literature and philosophy, who had once impulsively driven 8 hours to see a favorite author speak, who had danced on tables and written poetry, and believed in her own voice. "I'm fine," she said, then surprised herself by adding, "Actually, I'm thinking about auditioning for a play at the community theater." The words hung between them, unexpected and significant. Claire's face lit up. "Really? That's fantastic. Remember when you played Laura in The Glass Menagerie in college? You were incredible." "That's the play they're doing, actually," Scarlett admitted, a flutter of pleasure warming her chest at Claire's remembered praise. "I doubt I'd get cast." "But are you kidding? You'd be amazing." Claire reached across the table and squeezed Scarlett's hand. "What does Nicholas think about it?" The question pierced the bubble of possibility that had been growing around Scarlett. "I haven't told him yet," she admitted. "He's been busy with work, and we have important clients coming for dinner tomorrow, and—" He trailed off, hearing the excuses for what they were. Claire's expression softened with understanding. "Scar, can I ask you something? Are you happy?" The question was so direct, so simple, and yet Scarlett found herself unable to answer. Happy? The word seemed to belong to a foreign language she had once known, but had long forgotten. She wasn't unhappy exactly. She had a beautiful home, financial security, a husband who, despite his controlling nature, had never been physically abusive. Many women would envy her life. "I don't know," she finally whispered, her eyes fixed on the condensation dripping down the side of her water glass. "I think I forgot how to be anything." Claire didn't rush to offer platitudes or advice, for which Scarlett was profoundly grateful. Instead, her friend simply nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Then maybe this play is exactly what you need. A chance to remember." After lunch, Claire walked Scarlett to her car, hugging her tightly before they parted. "Promise me you'll go to that audition," she said. "And call me after, okay? I want to hear all about it." "I promise," Scarlett replied, and was surprised to realize she meant it. That evening, Nicholas returned home in a foul mood, his business dinner having gone poorly. He loosened his tie with jerky movements as he poured himself a generous glass of whiskey. "Incompetent idiots," he muttered, downing half the glass in one swallow. "Can't follow simple instructions." Scarlett moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing his favorite pasta dish as a peace offering. She had learned years ago that the best response to Nicholas's anger was to make herself useful and unobtrusive until the storm passed. "How was your day?" she asked, when his breathing had steadied and the tightness around his mouth had relaxed somewhat. Nicholas sighed, rolling his shoulders to release tension. "Frustrating. The Henderson account is proving more complicated than anticipated." He glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. "But this pasta smells good. Thank you." It was as close to an apology as she would get for his mood. Scarlett set the table and served the food, listening as Nicholas detailed the problems with his clients and colleagues, offering sympathetic noises at appropriate intervals. This was their routine. His day was significant, filled with important decisions and interactions. Hers was merely the backdrop against which his life played out. "Enough about my day," Nicholas said eventually, refilling his wine glass. "Did you confirm the details for tomorrow's dinner with the Davenports?" "Yes, everything's arranged," Scarlett assured him. "I'll pick up the fresh flowers in the morning, and the butcher is setting aside the best cuts of beef for us." Nicholas nodded, pleased. "Good. Gerald Davenport is a traditional man who appreciates a well-run household. His wife is quiet, so you'll need to carry the conversation with her." Scarlett nodded, mentally preparing for her role as the perfect hostess. It was a performance she had perfected over the years, as carefully choreographed as any theatrical production. The thought brought her back to the audition flyer, still hidden in her purse. The urge to mention it to Nicholas rose within her, then faded just as quickly. Now wasn't the time, not with the important dinner tomorrow and his mood still precarious. Later, as she was preparing for bed, Scarlett found herself studying her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "I saw Claire today," she practiced saying aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm thinking of auditioning for a play." The words sounded strange in her mouth, foreign and dangerous. Nicholas's voice called from the bedroom. "Did you say something, Scarlett?" "Just talking to myself," she replied, quickly applying her night cream. "I'll be right out." In bed, with Nicholas already beginning to snore beside her, Scarlett stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine herself on stage again, speaking someone else's words, but with her own voice. The image was both terrifying and exhilarating. Tomorrow, she decided. After the Davenports left, she would tell Nicholas about the audition. Not ask permission, tell him. The distinction felt important. Wednesday dawned clear and bright. A perfect early autumn day. Scarlett rose early, as always, and began the elaborate preparation for the evening's dinner party. By 4 o'clock, the house was immaculate, the tables set with their finest china and crystal, fresh flowers arranged artfully throughout the public rooms. The aroma of slow roasting beef filled the air, rich and promising. Scarlett herself was equally well prepared, dressed in the navy-sheath dress Nicholas had specified, her hair and makeup flawless. She checked her reflection one last time before Nicholas arrived home, turning slightly to ensure the dress still fit perfectly. It did, of course. She maintained her weight with the same careful attention she gave to every other aspect of her role as Mrs. Nicholas Lockhart. Nicholas arrived home at 5:30, just as planned, giving himself time to shower and change before the Davenport's 6:30 arrival. He inspected the house with a critical eye, nodding approvingly. "Everything looks perfect," he said, placing a quick kiss on Scarlett's cheek. "You've outdone yourself." The compliment warmed her despite everything, a reminder of how deeply his approval had become woven into her sense of self-worth. "Thank you," she said. I want everything to be perfect for your clients." Gerald and Marianne Davenport arrived precisely on time. He, in an expensive but conservative suit. She, in a simple black dress, adorned only with a strand of pearls. Gerald was tall and imposing, with steel-gray hair and a firm handshake. Marianne was petite and blonde, her smile pleasant but reserved. "What a lovely home," Marianne commented as Scarlett took her coat. "You have exquisite taste." "Thank you," Scarlett replied warmly, ushering them into the living room where Nicholas was preparing drinks. "Though I can't take all the credit, Nicholas has a wonderful eye for design." It was the right thing to say. She could tell by the slight nod of approval Nicholas gave her over the Davenports' heads. The evening proceeded exactly as planned, the conversation flowing smoothly from business to travel to shared acquaintances. Scarlett served the perfectly cooked meal with graceful efficiency, keeping Marianne engaged with questions about her children and charity work, while the men discussed the potential business partnership. After dinner, as Nicholas and Gerald retired to the study with brandy and cigars, Scarlett and Marianne settled in the living room with coffee. "You and Nicholas seem to have the perfect marriage," Marianne observed, her voice soft and a little wistful. "Gerald and I have been married 30 years, but he still treats me like I'm his secretary rather than his wife." The candid admission caught Scarlett off guard. "I'm sure that's not true," she said automatically, her hostess' smile firmly in place. Marianne gave a small, sad laugh. "Oh, it is. But that's what happens when you give up everything for a man's career. You become an accessory, not a partner." She glanced toward the study, then leaned forward slightly. "Do you ever miss it? Having your own life?" The question struck Scarlett like a physical blow. "I have a good life," she managed, the practiced response feeling hollow. "That's not what I asked," Marianne said gently. "Before I married Gerald, I was studying to be a concert pianist. I was good, really good, but it wasn't suitable for the wife of an up-and-coming executive." She twisted her wedding ring, a massive diamond that caught the light. "Sometimes I still play, when he's away on business trips, just for myself. It's the only time I feel real." Scarlett felt a profound connection to this quiet woman who had seemed so forgettable at first glance. "I used to write," she admitted softly. "Poetry, mostly, and I acted in college." Marianne's eyes brightened with understanding. "And now? I'm thinking of auditioning for a community theater production," Scarlett confessed, the words coming out in a rush. "I haven't told Nicholas yet." "Don't," Marianne advised, surprising Scarlett with her vehemence. "Don't tell him until you have to. Men like our husbands. They think they want perfect wives, but what they really want are dolls they can position however they like. The moment you show them you're a real person with desires of your own." She trailed off, then smiled sadly. "Just be careful." The conversation shifted to safer topics as the men rejoined them, but Marianne's words lingered in Scarlett's mind long after the Davenports had left, and Nicholas had declared the evening a success. "Gerald was impressed," he told her as they prepared for bed. "Not just with me, but with you, with our home. The contract is as good as signed." "I'm glad," Scarlett said, removing her earrings and placing them carefully in her jewelry box. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Nicholas, there's something I wanted to talk to you about." He looked up from his phone, his expression distracted. "What is it?" The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Scarlett thought of Marianne's advice, of the flyer still hidden in her purse, of the audition just 9 days away. "I was thinking of redecorating the guest bathroom," she said finally, the lie coming easily. "The fixtures are looking dated." Nicholas nodded absently, his attention already returning to his phone. "Whatever you think best, dear. You have good taste." He set an alarm and placed his phone on the nightstand. "I have an early meeting tomorrow. Good night." "Good night," Scarlett replied, turning off her bedside lamp. In the darkness, she made her decision. She would audition for the play, but she wouldn't tell Nicholas. Not until she had to. Not until she had something of her own that couldn't be taken away. Marianne was right. Some truths were better kept hidden, at least for now. The next morning, after Nicholas left for work, Scarlett found herself drawn to the community center again. She parked across the street, watching as a small group of people entered the building with scripts in hand. Through the large windows, she could see Bridget Kendrick gesturing animatedly as she spoke to the assembled actors. Gathering her courage, Scarlett crossed the street and slipped quietly into the auditorium, taking a seat in the back row. They were working on a scene between Tom and Amanda, the mother and son whose tense relationship formed the emotional core of the play. The actors were good, not professional caliber, but sincere and engaged with the material. Remember, Bridget was saying, this play is about escape, from reality, from responsibility, from the past. Everyone in this family is trapped in their own way, and everyone is looking for a way out. The words resonated with Scarlett, striking a chord deep within her. Wasn't that exactly what she was doing now? Looking for an escape, a way out of the carefully constructed prison of her marriage? Not to leave Nicholas necessarily, but to find a space where she could exist as herself, not just as an extension of him. After the rehearsal ended, Bridget noticed Scarlett in the back row and waved her down. "You came back," she said, her smile warm and welcoming. "I hoped you would." "I'm still not sure about auditioning," Scarlett admitted. "It's been so long since I've done anything like this." "Theater is like riding a bicycle," Bridget assured her. "The muscle memory is still there, even if you're a bit wobbly at first." She studied Scarlett with keen eyes. "What's really holding you back?" Scarlett hesitated, unaccustomed to such direct questioning. "My husband," she finally said. "He wouldn't understand." Bridget nodded, unsurprised. "I've been directing community theater for 27 years, Scarlett. You wouldn't believe how many talented people I've met who put their passions aside because someone else didn't understand or approve," she sighed. "But here's what I've learned. Art isn't a luxury or a hobby. For people like us, it's oxygen. We can hold our breath for a long time, years even. But eventually, we either breathe or we die." The metaphor hit Scarlett with unexpected force. Wasn't that exactly how she felt? Like she'd been holding her breath for 15 years, slowly suffocating in the airless perfection of her life with Nicholas? "The auditions are next Friday evening," Bridget continued. 7 o'clock. "No preparation necessary. We'll have you read from the script." She handed Scarlett another flyer, in case you lost the first one. Scarlett took it, noticing that Bridget had written her phone number on the back. "Thank you," she said. "I'll think about it." "Do more than think," Bridget advised with a gentle smile. "Decide, then act. That's what theater is all about, isn't it?" As Scarlett drove home, she felt a strange sense of calm settling over her. The decision had been made, though she hadn't consciously acknowledged it until now. She would audition for the play. She would create this small space for herself, this pocket of air where she could finally breathe. Nicholas didn't need to know. Not yet. Maybe not ever, if she wasn't cast. But deep down, a part of her hoped she would be. Hoped that this small act of rebellion would lead to something larger. Not an escape from her marriage, perhaps, but an escape from the cage she had helped to build around herself, bar by careful bar, until she could no longer remember what it felt like to spread her wings. That night, as Nicholas talked about his successful meeting with Gerald Davenport, Scarlett listened and nodded appropriately, all while a new thought circled in her mind. "My husband only thinks I'm beautiful in the dark, but what if I could shine in the light? What if I could remember how to fly?" The next 8 days passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Scarlett found herself drawn repeatedly to the community center, where she would slip quietly into the back of the auditorium and watch rehearsals for The Glass Menagerie. Sometimes Bridget would notice her and wave. Other times, Scarlett would leave undetected, carrying with her the resonant words of Tennessee Williams and a growing sense of purpose. At home, she maintained her careful performance as Nicholas's perfect wife, but something had shifted inside her. She began to observe him with new eyes, noting the casual way he dismissed her opinions, the subtle condescension in his tone when he explained things to her, the implicit assumption that her time and interests were less valuable than his. Had he always been this way? Or had they both gradually settled into these roles over the years? On Wednesday evening, Nicholas announced he would be traveling to Chicago for business the following week. "I leave Thursday morning and return Saturday night," he told her over dinner. "The Anderson merger is finally happening, and I need to be there in person to finalize the details." Scarlett nodded, keeping her expression neutral even as her heart began to race. Thursday was the day after her audition. If she were cast in the play, she would have those 3 days to attend rehearsals without having to explain her absences or invent excuses. "Do you want me to come with you?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Nicholas rarely included her on business trips unless there were social events where a wife was expected. "No need," he replied predictably. "It will be all meetings and paperwork. You'd be bored." He took a sip of wine, then added, "Besides, you have that charity committee meeting on Friday, don't you?" Scarlett froze momentarily. There was no charity committee meeting. It had been cancelled weeks ago, but she had never mentioned this to Nicholas. The fact that he remembered her schedule at all was surprising. The fact that he had the details wrong was fortuitous. "Yes," she lied smoothly. "The spring gala planning. It's going to be quite involved this year." Nicholas nodded, satisfied, and the conversation moved on to his upcoming presentation for the Anderson executives. Scarlett listened attentively, all while thinking about the audition that was now just 2 days away. That night, after Nicholas had fallen asleep, Scarlett slipped out of bed and into the guest bathroom with her laptop. She searched for information about The Glass Menagerie, refreshing her memory of the play she had loved in college. She read analyses of the characters, particularly Amanda Wingfield, the faded Southern belle desperately trying to secure a future for her daughter while living in denial about her own circumstances. Although Laura, the painfully shy daughter, had been the role she played in college, Scarlett found herself drawn to Amanda now. There was something about the character's desperate clinging to illusions, her frantic efforts to maintain appearances while her world crumbled around her, that resonated deeply with Scarlett's current situation. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear. Nicholas left early for work, reminding Scarlett that they had dinner reservations at 7:30 at Le Bernardin, his favorite restaurant. "Wear the red dress," he instructed, "the one with the low back, and the diamond earrings I gave you for our anniversary." After he left, Scarlett stood in their walk-in closet, staring at the red dress in question. It was beautiful, certainly, a designer piece that had cost more than some people's monthly rent, but Nicholas had selected it, just as he selected most of her wardrobe. When was the last time she had chosen something to wear simply because she liked it, because it made her feel good, rather than because it projected the right image? On impulse, Scarlett drove to a small boutique in a neighboring town, one where she was unlikely to run into any of Nicholas's colleagues' wives. She browsed the racks slowly, enjoying the simple pleasure of touching fabrics and considering colors without Nicholas's voice in her head, evaluating each choice. A sales associate approached, smiling warmly. "Can I help you find something?" "I'm just looking," Scarlett replied automatically, then hesitated. "Actually, yes. I need something that makes me feel strong." The woman nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable request. "Special occasion?" "Yes," Scarlett said, though she couldn't have explained what the occasion was. An awakening? A rebellion? A resurrection? The associate brought several options to the fitting room. Scarlett tried each one, studying her reflection with critical eyes. The third option, a deep emerald green dress with a subtle but flattering silhouette, made her pause. The color brought out the blue of her eyes and complemented her dark hair. It wasn't showy or overtly sexy, like the red dress Nicholas preferred. Instead, it was elegant and confident. "This one," she decided, her voice firm. "I'll take this one." The dress was carefully wrapped in tissue paper and placed in a discreet, unmarked bag. Scarlett paid with cash rather than her credit card, knowing Nicholas monitored their accounts. It was her first secret purchase in years, a small act of independence that felt simultaneously trivial and monumental. Back at home, she hid the dress at the back of her closet, behind rarely worn winter coats, then spent the afternoon preparing for dinner. She styled her hair the way Nicholas liked it, applied her makeup with precision, and donned the red dress and diamond earrings as instructed. When he arrived home and nodded approvingly at her appearance, she felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching herself play a role in a film. Dinner was pleasant enough. Nicholas was in a good mood, having closed an important deal that afternoon. He ordered for both of them without consulting her preferences, another long-standing habit that Scarlett had once found romantic, but now recognized as controlling. "You seem distracted tonight," Nicholas observed as they waited for dessert. "Is something wrong?" Scarlett forced a smile. "Just tired, I think, and I have a slight headache." Nicholas frowned slightly. "You're not getting sick, are you? I can't afford to catch anything before my Chicago trip." "No, it's nothing serious," she assured him quickly. "Just a tension headache. I'll take some aspirin when we get home." He nodded, returning to his story about the difficult client he had finally won over. Scarlett sipped her wine and thought about the audition, now less than 24 hours away. The headache wasn't entirely a fabrication. Anxiety about tomorrow had created a persistent throb behind her eyes. The next morning, Scarlett woke with a knot of tension in her stomach. Nicholas had an early golf game with clients, which meant she had the house to herself until late afternoon. She spent the morning cleaning vigorously, as if physical activity could burn off her nervous energy. At noon, she forced herself to eat a light lunch, though food seemed to stick in her throat. Then she took a long shower, letting the hot water ease some of the tension from her shoulders. As she dried her hair, she studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "You can do this," she told herself quietly. "It's just an audition. If you don't get cast, nothing changes. If you do..." She left the thought unfinished, unsure what would happen if she actually secured a role in the play. At 6:30, Scarlett changed into the green dress she had purchased the day before, applying minimal makeup and styling her hair in loose waves rather than the sleek, controlled style Nicholas preferred. She added the silver quill pen necklace from her college days, touching the pendant like a talisman. Nicholas called as she was preparing to leave. "Just finishing up the round," he said. "These clients play slowly. I'll be home around 8. "I'm going out for a bit," Scarlett replied, surprising herself with her directness. "Claire is in town again and asked if I could meet her for coffee." There was a brief pause. "Claire from college? The redhead?" "Yes, we're meeting at that cafe near the library." The lie came easily, specific enough to sound plausible but vague enough to avoid verification. "All right," Nicholas said, his tone suggesting mild disapproval but not outright suspicion. "Don't be too late. We should discuss the arrangements for my Chicago trip." "I won't," Scarlett promised, guilt and relief washing through her in equal measure. "See you soon." The community center parking lot was already half full when Scarlett arrived. She sat in her car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel as she gathered her courage. Finally, she took a deep breath, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, and stepped out of the car. Inside, the auditorium buzzed with nervous energy. About 20 people milled around, some clearly experienced and confident, others looking as anxious as Scarlett felt. She scanned the room for Bridget, finally spotting the director at a table near the stage, reviewing papers with a younger man who appeared to be her assistant. Scarlett approached hesitantly. "Hello, Bridget." Bridget looked up, her face breaking into a warm smile. "Scarlett, you came." She stood and gestured to the clipboard in front of her. "Sign in here and take a script. We're having everyone read Amanda's monologue from Act 1, the one about the 17 gentlemen callers. Do you know it?" "I think so," Scarlett replied, memories of her college production filtering back. "It's been a while, though. Take some time to review it." Bridget suggested, handing her a script. "We're going in alphabetical order by last name, so you'll be somewhere in the middle." Scarlett found a seat toward the back of the auditorium and opened the script with trembling hands. The familiar words leapt off the page. Amanda's reminiscences about her youth in Blue Mountain, her parade of gentlemen callers, her desperate attempts to create a similar future for her daughter. Scarlett read through the monologue several times, the words beginning to flow more naturally with each repetition. One by one, the other auditioners took the stage. Some were clearly seasoned performers. Others stumbled through the lines with varying degrees of success. Scarlett watched intently, her own nervousness temporarily forgotten, as she became absorbed in the different interpretations of Amanda's character. "Scarlett Lockhart," Bridget finally called. For a moment, Scarlett couldn't move. Then, as if in a dream, she rose and walked to the stage, script clutched in her hand. The lights were brighter than she expected, making it difficult to see the audience clearly. "A small mercy. Whenever you're ready," Bridget said encouragingly. Scarlett took a deep breath, set the script on a nearby stool in case she needed it, and began. "One Sunday afternoon in Blue Mountain, your mother received 17 gentlemen callers." As she spoke Amanda's words, something strange and wonderful happened. The nervousness fell away, replaced by a sense of inhabiting another person's skin. She found herself gesturing as Amanda would, adopting the lilting southern accent, infusing the lines with the desperation and nostalgia that characterized the faded Southern belle. Sometimes there weren't chairs enough to accommodate them all. "We had to send the nigger for folding chairs," she continued, wincing internally at the dated racial slur, but maintaining character, understanding that the language was authentic to the period and Amanda's background. As the monologue progressed, Scarlett felt herself fully disappearing into Amanda. Her delusions, her fears, her fierce determination to create a better future for her children despite the harsh realities of their situation. When she finished with, "All of my gentlemen callers were sons of planters, and so of course I assumed that I would be married to one and raise my family on a large piece of land with plenty of servants. But man proposes, and woman accepts the proposal." She was breathing heavily, emotional from the performance. There was a moment of silence, then Bridget began to applaud, followed by the rest of the room. "Thank you, Scarlett," the director said, making a note on her clipboard. "That was quite remarkable." Scarlett nodded, suddenly self-conscious again as she stepped down from the stage. She returned to her seat, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. Had she done well enough? Too well? Not well enough? The uncertainty was excruciating. After the last auditioner had finished, Bridget addressed the group. "Thank you all for coming tonight. You've given us some difficult decisions to make." She gestured to the young man beside her. "Mark and I will deliberate over the weekend. The cast list will be posted on the Community Center bulletin board by Monday afternoon, and we'll also call those who are cast. First rehearsal will be next Tuesday evening at 7. As the group began to disperse, Bridget approached Scarlett. "I'm glad you came," she said warmly. "So am I," Scarlett replied, surprised to realize how deeply she meant it. Even if she wasn't cast, the simple act of auditioning, of taking this small step toward reclaiming her voice, felt like a victory. "Where did you train?" Bridget asked curiously. "Your technique is polished." "Just college theater," Scarlett admitted. "A long time ago." Bridget nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you've retained a lot. Natural talent, I suppose." She glanced at her watch. "I won't keep you, but I'm very glad you decided to audition, Scarlett." On the drive home, Scarlett felt lighter than she had in years, as if some invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had done it. She had stood on that stage and spoken with her own voice, even if the words belonged to someone else. For those few minutes, she had existed completely outside of Nicholas's influence, completely as herself. Nicholas's car was in the driveway when she arrived home. Scarlett quickly checked her appearance in the vanity mirror, ensuring no trace of her excitement remained visible. She had decided during the drive to change clothes before entering the house, not wanting to explain the green dress Nicholas had never seen before. She parked on the street, slipped into the house through the side door that led directly to the laundry room, and quickly changed into jeans and a sweater she often wore around the house. "There you are," Nicholas said when she entered the living room. "I was beginning to worry. How was Claire?" "Good," Scarlett replied, the lie coming easily. It was nice to catch up. Nicholas nodded absently, his attention already returning to the golf magazine in his lap. "I've laid out everything I'll need for Chicago on the bed. Can you pack it all tomorrow? And make sure my blue suit is back from the dry cleaners." "Of course," Scarlett agreed, relief washing through her. He suspected nothing. Her secret was safe, at least for now. Sunday passed in a blur of domestic activities. Scarlett cooked Nicholas's favorite breakfast, attended to his laundry, packed meticulously for his Chicago trip, and generally played the role of devoted wife with practiced ease. All the while, her mind kept returning to the audition, to the feeling of standing on that stage and being truly seen for the first time in years. Monday morning, Nicholas left early for a breakfast meeting before his afternoon flight to Chicago. After he was gone, Scarlett found herself drawn to the community center once again. She knew the cast list wouldn't be posted until afternoon, but she couldn't focus on anything else. She drove downtown and parked across the street, watching as people came and went from the brick building, wondering if any of them had been at the audition. At precisely 1 o'clock, she saw Bridget arrive, accompanied by her assistant Mark. They entered the building, remained inside for about 15 minutes, then left. Scarlett waited another 10 minutes before gathering her courage and crossing the street. The community center lobby was quiet, just a few elderly people playing cards in one corner, and a young mother with a toddler waiting for what appeared to be a Mommy and Me class. Scarlett approached the bulletin board with her heart pounding in her throat. There it was, a simple white sheet of paper with "Cast List, The Glass Menagerie," printed at the top. Scarlett scanned the list, her eyes moving frantically. Tom Wingfield, Michael Donnelly, Amanda Wingfield, Scarlett Lockhart, Laura Wingfield, Jessica Chen, Jim O'Connor, David Martinez. She had to read it 3 times before the reality sank in. She had been cast, not just in the play, but as Amanda, one of the lead roles. A mixture of elation and terror washed over her. She had done it. She had taken this step, and now there was no turning back. As she stood frozen before the bulletin board, her phone rang in her purse. The display showed an unfamiliar number. She answered hesitantly. "Scarlett, it's Bridget Kendrick." The director's voice was warm with enthusiasm. "I'm calling to let you know you've been cast as Amanda Wingfield in our production. Your audition was exceptional, and the committee was unanimous in their decision." "Thank you," Scarlett managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm honored." "You should be," Bridget replied. "It's a challenging role, but I believe you'll be magnificent. Our first rehearsal is tomorrow evening at 7. Can you make it?" Tomorrow. Nicholas would be in Chicago. "Yes," Scarlett said, her decision immediate and certain. "I'll be there." "Wonderful. We'll do a read-through of the entire play and discuss scheduling for the upcoming weeks. The performance dates are the last weekend in April. That's about 8 weeks of rehearsal. It's a commitment, but I promise it will be worth it." After hanging up, Scarlett remained in the lobby, trying to process what had just happened. 8 weeks of rehearsals, performances, a real commitment to something that was entirely her own. How would she explain her absences to Nicholas? How would she maintain this secret life without him discovering it? And yet, beneath the practical concerns, a wild joy was bubbling up inside her. She had been chosen. Her talent had been recognized. For the first time in 15 years, she had achieved something that had nothing to do with Nicholas, something that belonged entirely to her. As she drove home, Scarlett began mentally calculating how many rehearsals she could attend during Nicholas's business trips, how many she might be able to explain away with fictitious committee meetings and coffee dates with friends. It wouldn't be easy, but somehow She would make it work. She had to make it work. That evening, she drove Nicholas to the airport, kissing him goodbye with her usual wifely devotion. "Have a successful trip," she said. "Call me when you land." "I will," he promised, straightening his tie. "Don't forget to water the orchids in the sunroom. And the Hendersons might call about that dinner next month. Tell them we're available on the 12th, not the 5th. Scarlett nodded, making mental notes of his instructions. As she watched him walk through the security checkpoint, she felt a strange sense of dissonance. This was her husband of 15 years, the center around which her entire life had revolved, and yet at this moment, he seemed almost like a stranger. Or perhaps it was she who had become a stranger, someone Nicholas wouldn't recognize if he could see beneath the carefully maintained surface. On the drive home, Scarlett rolled down the windows despite the cool evening air and turned the radio to a station Nicholas never approved of. Too commercial, too mainstream. She sang along loudly to a pop song, laughing at her own terrible voice. For these 3 days, the house would be hers alone. 3 days in which she could begin to remember who Scarlett Lockhart had been before she became Mrs. Nicholas Lockhart. 3 days to start becoming someone new, someone who might, someday, be strong enough to step out of the shadows and into the light. Tuesday morning, Scarlett woke with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The house seemed different somehow, larger, full of possibilities, without Nicholas's commanding presence. She lingered over breakfast, reading the news on her tablet rather than rushing to prepare Nicholas's preferred morning meal, and even left her coffee mug in the sink rather than washing it immediately. These tiny rebellions felt both ridiculous and significant. How had she become someone who found it thrilling to leave a dirty dish in the sink? When had her life become so constrained that reading the news at her own pace felt like an indulgence? After breakfast, she called Claire, needing to share her news with someone who would understand its significance. "I got the part," she said when her friend answered, not bothering with preliminaries. Claire's squeal of delight was so loud that Scarlett had to hold the phone away from her ear. "I knew it! I absolutely knew it! Tell me everything!" Scarlett described the audition, Bridget's call, and the first rehearsal scheduled for that evening. "I have no idea how I'm going to manage this once Nicholas gets back from Chicago, but right now, I don't care. I'm just happy." "You deserve to be happy, Scar," Claire said, her voice turning serious, "and you deserve to have something that's just yours. We'll figure out the logistics later. For now, just enjoy this moment." After hanging up, Scarlett went to the attic and pulled out the boxes of her college mementos again. This time, she didn't just look through them furtively. She brought them downstairs to the living room and spread their contents across the coffee table that was usually reserved for Nicholas's carefully curated art books. Among the photos and notebooks, she found the program from her college production of The Glass Menagerie, where she had played Laura. There she was, captured in black and white, her face younger, but her eyes already showing signs of the uncertainty that had allowed Nicholas to gradually take control of her life. She had been so eager to please back then, so desperate for approval and direction. Flipping through her old script, she found her highlighted lines and margin notes. Her interpretation of Laura had been praised by the college newspaper as heartbreakingly vulnerable, yet ultimately resilient. She wondered if that resilience had been real or just good acting, and if it had been real, where had it gone? How had she allowed it to be slowly eroded by Nicholas's constant corrections and subtle criticisms? At 4 o'clock, Scarlett began preparing for the rehearsal with the same care she usually devoted to getting ready for Nicholas's business dinners. She showered, dried her hair, and applied light makeup, enough to enhance her features, but not so much that it would appear she was trying too hard. After some deliberation, she chose a pair of well-fitted jeans and a soft blue sweater that complemented her eyes. The outfit was casual but flattering, something she might have chosen for herself in college, before Nicholas began selecting her wardrobe. As she fastened the silver quill pen necklace around her throat, her phone chimed with a text from Nicholas. "Meeting's running long. We'll call tomorrow instead. Make sure landscapers trim hedges properly tomorrow." Scarlett texted back a simple acknowledgement, relief washing over her. One less performance to manage tonight. She could focus entirely on the rehearsal without having to shift mental gears for a conversation with Nicholas afterward. She arrived at the community center 20 minutes early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. The parking lot was still relatively empty, but she recognized Bridget's car and a few others from the audition night. Inside, the auditorium was set up differently, chairs arranged in a circle on the stage rather than in rows facing it. Bridget looked up from her notes and waved Scarlett over. "You're early." "Perfect. Help me distribute these scripts, would you?" The simple task of placing scripts and pencils on each chair helped calm Scarlett's nerves. As she worked, Bridget chatted about her vision for the production. "I want to keep the staging minimal, but evocative," she explained. "The apartment is a cage, but also a sanctuary. The fire escape is freedom, but also danger. Every element should have that duality." Scarlett nodded, fascinated by Bridget's passion and clarity. "I've been thinking about Amanda," she ventured, "about how she's trapped by her illusions, but also saved by them." Bridget's eyes lit up. "Exactly. That's exactly it. Amanda is a survivor, fundamentally. Everything she does, the nagging, the storytelling, the delusions, it's all survival strategy. She's not a villain. She's a woman doing the best she can with limited options." She studied Scarlett thoughtfully. "You understand her intuitively, don't you?" Before Scarlett could respond, other cast members began arriving. Michael Donnelly, cast as Tom, was a tall man in his mid-30s with an energetic presence and quick smile. Jessica Chen, the young woman playing Laura, seemed appropriately shy and delicate. David Martinez, who would play the gentleman caller, arrived last, apologizing for his tardiness with a charm that immediately explained why he had been cast as Jim. Bridget gathered them in the circle of chairs and began with introductions. When it was Scarlett's turn, she felt a momentary panic. What could she say about herself? That she was Nicholas Lockhart's carefully maintained wife? That she had spent 15 years erasing herself? "I'm Scarlett," she said finally. "I studied theater in college, but haven't performed since then. I'm finding my way back to it." The words felt true in a way that surprised her. Bridget nodded encouragingly before moving on to Jessica. After introductions, they did a read-through of the entire play, pausing occasionally for Bridget to explain her vision for certain scenes or to answer questions about characterization. Reading Amanda's lines aloud in this setting, not as an audition but as an actual cast member, Scarlett felt something unlock inside her. The character's desperation, her determination, her fierce love for her children, despite her suffocating methods, all of it resonated deeply. Amanda was trapped by circumstances, by her own past, by the limited options available to a woman of her generation. Her manipulative behavior wasn't malicious. It was a survival mechanism. "She's not so different from me," Scarlett thought with a jolt of recognition. She, too, had been surviving in her own way, adapting to the constraints of her marriage by becoming smaller, quieter, more compliant. The realization was both painful and oddly liberating. After the read-through, Bridget distributed the rehearsal schedule. "We'll meet Tuesday and Thursday evenings from 7 to 9:30, and Saturday afternoons from 1 to 4, she explained. "I know everyone has jobs and lives outside this production, so I try to be respectful of your time. That said, as we get closer to opening night, we may need some additional rehearsals." Scarlett studied the schedule with a sinking feeling. Tuesday and Thursday evenings might be manageable. Nicholas often worked late or had business dinners, but Saturday afternoons would be almost impossible to explain. Nicholas's weekends were meticulously planned, and her presence was generally required. As if sensing her concern, Bridget approached after dismissing the group. Everything okay with the schedule? Scarlett hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. My husband travels frequently for business, but when he's home, he expects me to be available, especially on weekends. Bridget nodded, unsurprised. I've been doing this a long time, Scarlett. I've worked with busy professionals, single parents, people caring for elderly relatives. We can make accommodations when necessary. For instance, we could schedule your scenes for the evenings when possible and work around your weekend availability. Thank you, Scarlett said, touched by the director's understanding. I'll make it work somehow. This is important to me. I can see that, Bridget replied with a gentle smile. And for what it's worth, you're going to be an extraordinary Amanda. There's something in you that understands her deeply. On the drive home, Scarlett found herself thinking about Amanda Wingfield with a new perspective. The character was often portrayed as a harridan, a nagging mother whose delusions and manipulations drove her son away. But what if she was actually the hero of her own story? A woman abandoned by her husband, left to raise 2 children alone during the Depression, clinging to her memories of a better time as a way to survive the harsh present. Wasn't there something heroic in that? In refusing to be crushed by reality? In maintaining hope despite all evidence that it was futile? Perhaps Amanda's flaw wasn't her delusion, but her attempt to force her children into the same protective fantasy. By the time Scarlett arrived home, her mind was buzzing with insights about the character and the play. She made herself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table with her script, making notes in the margins, just as she had done in college. For the first time in years, she felt intellectually engaged, creatively alive. The next morning, she woke early and spent an hour practicing Amanda's monologues before the landscapers arrived. She greeted them with her usual politeness, but found herself less concerned about ensuring they followed Nicholas's precise instructions. Instead, she retreated to the sunroom with her script while they worked, emerging only to offer them lemonade, something Nicholas would have considered inappropriate familiarity with service providers. Nicholas called that evening as she was preparing for the second rehearsal. "How are things at home?" he asked, after updating her on his meetings in Chicago. "Fine," Scarlett replied, keeping her voice even. "The landscapers came today. Everything looks perfect. Good. And did the Hendersons call about that dinner?" "Not yet, but I'll let them know the 12th works for us when they do." She paused, then added, "How are your meetings going?" Nicholas launched into a detailed account of his business dealings, neither noticing nor caring that she had deflected his questions about her activities. It had always been like this. His life was the main event. Hers was merely the supporting infrastructure that enabled his success. After promising to call again the following evening, Nicholas hung up. Scarlett stood in the kitchen for a moment, staring at her phone. How strange that she had once found his self-absorption flattering, as if his importance somehow extended to her by proximity. Now it just seemed sad, this mutual delusion they had constructed, that his career justified her erasure. The second rehearsal focused on blocking, the physical movement of actors on stage. Bridget had them work through several key scenes, including the opening interactions between Amanda and Tom. Michael, playing Tom, brought an intense energy to the role, his frustration with Amanda's nagging palpable. "Remember," Bridget advised Scarlett during a pause, "Amanda isn't trying to torture Tom. She genuinely believes she's helping him. Every criticism, every instruction comes from love. Misguided, perhaps, but real." Scarlett nodded, understanding completely. Wasn't that what Nicholas did as well? Every correction, every instruction about her appearance or behavior, he would say it was for her own good, to help her be her best self. The parallel was uncomfortable, but illuminating. After rehearsal, Michael suggested the cast go for coffee to get to know each other better. "First round's on me," he offered with an easy smile. "It's tradition." Scarlett hesitated, checking her watch. It was nearly 10, later than she would normally be out on a weeknight. But Nicholas was in Chicago. There was no one waiting for her at home. No one to question where she had been or With whom? I'd love to, she decided, the simple acceptance feeling like another small victory. The 4 cast members and Bridget gathered at a nearby cafe, claiming a corner table where they could talk freely. The conversation flowed easily from the play to their personal lives. Michael was a high school English teacher who had been acting in community theater for years. Jessica was a college student studying psychology. David worked in advertising and had stumbled into acting through a corporate team-building exercise. "What about you, Scarlett?" David asked. "Bridget says you were amazing in college. Why the long break from acting?" Scarlett took a sip of her tea, buying time. "Life happened, I guess. Marriage, responsibilities. It didn't seem important anymore." "Now?" Jessica asked softly. "Now it feels essential," Scarlett admitted, surprising herself with her candor. "Like something I need to do." Bridget nodded, understanding. "That's how art works, I think. It waits for you, sometimes for years. But when you're ready, it's still there." Later, as Scarlett drove home through the quiet streets, she found herself thinking about Bridget's words. Had her creativity, her passion, her authentic self simply been waiting all these years? Not dead, just dormant, like seeds beneath winter snow? Thursday's rehearsal focused on the scene where Amanda confronts Tom about his late nights out and his apparent dissatisfaction with his life and job. The emotional intensity required was challenging, forcing Scarlett to access feelings she had suppressed for years: anger, frustration, fear of abandonment. "More desperation," Bridget directed during one particularly difficult exchange. "Amanda is terrified that Tom will leave like his father did. Her anger is just fear in disguise." Scarlett closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about what true desperation felt like. Not the mild anxiety of potentially disappointing Nicholas, but real, existential fear. What if she lost everything? What if she were alone, with children to support, in a world that offered few options for women? When they ran the scene again, something shifted. Scarlett's voice took on a new urgency. Her movements became more frenetic, and her eyes held a wild quality that made Michael, as Tom, take an involuntary step backward. "Where are you going?" she demanded, Amanda's southern accent flowing naturally now. "Down to the movies? I don't believe that lie." When they finished the scene, there was a moment of stunned silence before Bridget began to applaud. "That," she said emphatically, "was Amanda Wingfield." The praise warmed Scarlett deeply, creating a glow that lasted throughout the evening and into the next day. For the first time in years, she had accomplished something based solely on her own abilities, her own understanding, her own emotional truth. No one had told her what to do or how to do it. She had simply accessed something authentic within herself and let it flow through Amanda's words. Nicholas called on Friday evening, as promised. "I'll be home tomorrow afternoon," he said. "The Anderson merger is proceeding better than expected. We might close earlier than planned." "That's wonderful," Scarlett replied automatically, her mind racing. Tomorrow was Saturday, rehearsal day. She had planned to attend while Nicholas was still in Chicago, but if he was coming home early, "Should I pick you up from the airport?" she asked, calculating times in her head. "No need. I'll take a car service. Should be home around 4. He paused, then added, "Let's go out for dinner tomorrow night. Somewhere nice. I feel like celebrating." "Of course," Scarlett agreed, her heart sinking. Rehearsal was from 1 to 4. Even if she left exactly at 4, she would barely have time to get home before Nicholas arrived. And if rehearsal ran long, or if traffic was bad, after hanging up she paced the kitchen, considering her options. She could skip rehearsal entirely, claiming illness. But the thought made her physically ill itself. She could go, but leave early, though that would mean missing crucial scenes. Or she could attend the full rehearsal and risk Nicholas arriving home before her, raising questions she wasn't prepared to answer. In the end, she decided to be honest, with Bridget at least. She called the director and explained the situation. "I understand completely," Bridget assured her. We'll work on scenes that don't involve Amanda for the last hour tomorrow. You can leave at 3, which should give you plenty of time to get home before your husband. The solution was so simple, so accommodating, that Scarlett felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I really didn't want to miss rehearsal." "We don't want you to miss it either," Bridget replied warmly. "You're our Amanda, after all. You're our Amanda." The words echoed in Scarlett's mind as she prepared for bed. She was Amanda, not just Nicholas's wife, not just the perfect hostess or the impeccably groomed accessory to his success. She was a character in her own right, with depths and complexities, and a voice that deserved to be heard. The next day, Scarlett arrived at rehearsal 15 minutes early, her script thoroughly annotated with notes and questions. She had spent the morning practicing Amanda's monologues, experimenting with different inflections and gestures until her voice was slightly hoarse. Bridget had arranged the schedule as promised, focusing first on scenes involving Amanda. They worked through the heart-wrenching moment when Amanda confronts Laura about dropping out of business college, her dreams for her daughter's future crumbling before her eyes. "She's not angry because Laura wasted money," Scarlett observed during a brief break. "She's angry because Laura has limited her own options even further." Amanda sees what happens to women without financial security. Bridget nodded approvingly. "Exactly. Amanda knows exactly how precarious their situation is. One missed rent payment, one illness, and they could lose everything." At precisely 3 o'clock, Bridget called for a break. "Scarlett needs to leave a bit early today," she announced casually. "We'll use the last hour to work on the scenes between Tom and Jim, and the Jim and Laura scenes." As Scarlett gathered her things, Michael approached. "You were incredible today," he said sincerely. "That moment when you realized Laura had been lying about going to college, I actually felt guilty, and I'm not even playing Laura." Scarlett laughed, the sound surprisingly free and natural. "Thank you. It's all Bridget's direction, really." "No," Michael said, shaking his head. "Bridget is great, but what you're doing with Amanda is special. You understand her from the inside out." The compliment stayed with Scarlett as she drove home, warming her like an ember in her chest. She arrived at 3:45, giving her just enough time to change clothes and fix her hair, before Nicholas's car pulled into the driveway at 4:10. "Welcome home," she greeted him at the door, the perfect wife once again. "How was your flight?" Nicholas kissed her cheek, his mind clearly still on business. "Fine, fine. The Anderson deal is almost complete. Just a few more details to iron out next week." He handed her his coat and briefcase, an automatic gesture that neither of them questioned. "I'm going to shower before dinner. Make a reservation at Vincenzo's for 7, would you?" As Nicholas disappeared upstairs, Scarlett hung his coat in the closet and placed his briefcase in his study, just as she had done hundreds of times before. But something had changed. The actions were the same, but the woman performing them was different. Subtly, perhaps imperceptibly to Nicholas, but profoundly to herself. That evening at Vincenzo's, Nicholas dominated the conversation as usual, detailing his business triumphs in Chicago, while Scarlett nodded and asked appropriate questions. Halfway through the main course, he finally asked, "And what about you? Anything interesting happen while I was gone?" Scarlett took a sip of wine, considering her response. The old Scarlett would have said, "Nothing special," and redirected the conversation back to Nicholas. But the woman who was beginning to emerge, the woman who was discovering her voice through Amanda Wingfield, felt a sudden urge toward honesty. "I've been thinking about taking an acting class," she said, watching his face carefully. "At the community center, just for fun." Nicholas's expression shifted from surprise to amusement. "Acting? You?" The condescension in his tone was exactly what she had expected, but it still stung. "Yes," she said, keeping her voice light. "I used to enjoy it in college, remember?" "That was a long time ago," Nicholas replied dismissively. "Before real life began." He cut a piece of his steak, chewed thoughtfully, then added, "Besides, community theater is so amateur. All those bored housewives and retirees playing pretend." The description was so dismissive, so disdainful of the very people who had welcomed her with open arms, that Scarlett felt a flash of genuine anger. She managed to maintain her pleasant expression, but something hardened inside her. "You're probably right," she said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "It was just a thought." Nicholas nodded, clearly pleased that she had seen reason so quickly. "If you're bored, why not volunteer for the hospital fundraising committee? Barbara Reynolds is chairing it this year, and she specifically mentioned wanting your help." "I'll give her a call," Scarlett promised, knowing she would do no such thing. Barbara Reynolds was one of Nicholas's colleagues' wives, a woman who was as carefully controlled by her husband as Scarlett was by Nicholas. As they drove home, Nicholas reached over and patted her knee. "I missed you," he said, the gesture possessive rather than affectionate. "The house in Chicago felt empty, without you managing everything." Scarlett smiled and placed her hand over his, the motion automatic after 15 years of marriage. But inside, where Nicholas couldn't see, something was changing. A quiet rebellion was taking root, nourished by Amanda Wingfield's desperate courage and Scarlett's own rediscovered voice. That night, as Nicholas slept beside her, Scarlett stared at the ceiling and made a decision. She would continue with the play, regardless of the complications, regardless of the lies she would need to tell. This one thing, this role, this creative expression, this community of people who saw her as more than Nicholas Lockhart's wife, was too important to surrender. In the darkness of their bedroom, she whispered Amanda's words like a promise to herself. "I'll tell you what I wished for on the moon, success and happiness for my precious children." But in her heart, for the first time in 15 years, she was wishing for something entirely for herself. The delicate balance of Scarlett's double life began the following Tuesday. Nicholas had an investment dinner with clients, giving her the perfect opportunity to attend rehearsal without explanation. Thursday proved more challenging. She fabricated a charity planning meeting, carefully selecting a committee Nicholas found too boring to inquire about. Each rehearsal deepened her connection to Amanda and to her fellow cast members, creating a sanctuary where she could be fully herself. Saturdays remained the greatest challenge. For the first weekend, she claimed a headache and encouraged Nicholas to golf without her, then slipped away to a 3-hour rehearsal while he was on the course. The second Saturday, she invented a shopping trip for his upcoming birthday. Nicholas, satisfied with the explanation and disinterested in retail excursions, asked no questions. "I don't know how long I can keep this up," Scarlett confided to Bridget after that rehearsal. "Every excuse makes me feel like I'm walking on thinner ice." Bridget's eyes were kind but direct. "Why not tell him the truth? Some husbands are more understanding than we expect." Scarlett thought of Nicholas's dismissive comments about community theater, his instinctive diminishment of her interests. "Not mine," she said simply. As March turned to April, Scarlett's portrayal of Amanda grew more nuanced, more emotionally raw. During a particularly powerful scene where Amanda confronts Tom about his late-night activities, Scarlett accessed emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Frustration, fear, desperate love. "Where have you been all these nights?" she demanded, Amanda's southern accent flowing naturally now. "I've been to the movies," Michael responded, as Tom, defiant yet guilty. "Don't lie to me. I don't believe you." Scarlett's voice cracked with genuine emotion. "Nobody goes to the movies night after night. Nobody in their right mind goes to the movies as often as you pretend to." When they finished the scene, there was a moment of stunned silence before Bridget spoke. "That was extraordinary," she said quietly. "You're not acting Amanda anymore, Scarlett. You're being her." The praise warmed Scarlett deeply, creating a glow that lasted throughout the evening and into the next day. For the first time in years, she had accomplished something based solely on her own abilities, her own understanding, her own emotional truth. Nicholas, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the transformation occurring in his wife. He noticed she seemed more energetic, more engaged, but attributed it to the new vitamins she had begun taking. A convenient explanation Scarlett had provided for her changed demeanor. He continued to dominate their conversations, make decisions without consulting her, and expect her unwavering support for his career and social obligations. 3 weeks before opening night, Bridget called an additional Sunday rehearsal. "I know it's last minute," she apologized, "but we need to work through the memory scene with Amanda's gentlemen callers. The lighting and timing have to be perfect." Scarlett nodded, already calculating. Nicholas usually spent Sunday mornings reviewing financial reports in his study, then expected her to accompany him to brunch with friends or colleagues. "What time?" she asked. 9 to noon, Bridget replied. "I know it's early, but it was the only time we could get the lighting technician." That Sunday morning, Scarlett woke at 6, quietly prepared Nicholas's coffee and breakfast, then announced she was meeting Claire for an early yoga class and brunch. "I should be back by 1, she said casually, wearing athleisure clothes that would support her story. "Plenty of time for the Miller's garden party this afternoon." Nicholas barely looked up from his financial papers. "Don't be late. Robert Miller is considering moving his investments to our firm." The rehearsal was intense and productive. The memory scene, where Amanda reminisces about her 17 gentlemen callers, required precise timing with lighting and music to create the dreamlike quality Bridget envisioned. Scarlett moved through the stage space as if floating on the currents of Amanda's memories, her voice taking on a wistful quality that made even the stage crew pause to watch. "That's it," Bridget said approvingly. "Amanda lives more in her memories than in her present. The past is where she felt valued, appreciated, seen." The word struck Scarlett with unexpected force. Wasn't that exactly what was happening to her now? After years of invisibility in her marriage, she was finally being seen. Not by Nicholas, but by Bridget, by her fellow cast members, by the audience that would soon witness her performance. She left rehearsal at 12:15, calculating she had just enough time to get home, shower, and change for the garden party. But as she pulled onto their street, she saw Nicholas standing in the driveway, checking his watch with evident irritation. Scarlett's heart plummeted. She pulled into the driveway, forcing a casual smile. "Hi, I'm not late, am I? I thought the party started at 2. Nicholas's expression was cold. "Where have you been? I called Claire an hour ago to ask if you were still with her. She seemed quite confused, said she hadn't seen you in weeks." The blood drained from Scarlett's face. In her careful planning, she hadn't anticipated Nicholas contacting Claire directly. "I can explain," she began, but he cut her off. "Save it. We're already late. The Miller's party was moved up to noon, which you would have known if you'd bothered to check the updated invitation I left on the counter." His voice was controlled, but laced with anger. "Go change. We'll discuss this later." The garden party passed in a blur of tension. Scarlett maintained her social smile, made appropriate conversation with the wives of Nicholas's colleagues, and pretended everything was normal. But inside, she was in turmoil. What would she tell Nicholas? How could she explain her deception without revealing the play? On the drive home, Nicholas maintained a frigid silence until they turned onto their street. "Who were you with this morning?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. Scarlett considered lying again, but recognized the futility. Nicholas would check any story she invented. "I was at rehearsal," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. "Rehearsal?" he repeated flatly. "For what, exactly?" "A play at the community theater. The Glass Menagerie. I'm playing Amanda Wingfield." The words emerged with unexpected pride despite her anxiety. Nicholas's laughter held no humor. "A play? You've been lying to me for weeks, so you could pretend to be an actress?" He shook his head in disbelief. "I thought it was another man. I almost wish it had been. At least, that would make sense." The dismissal stung, but Scarlett held her ground. "It makes perfect sense to me. I used to love acting. I'm good at it, Nicholas. Really good. That's irrelevant, he said as they pulled into the garage. You're my wife. You have responsibilities, obligations, not to mention that you've been lying to me for… how long exactly? Since February, Scarlett admitted, following him into the house. The auditions were while you were in San Francisco. Opening night is in 2 weeks. Nicholas removed his jacket and hung it precisely in the closet, his movements controlled. Well, you'll have to tell them you're quitting. Tomorrow. No, Scarlett said, the word emerging before she could reconsider. I won't quit. Nicholas turned to face her, genuine surprise breaking through his anger. In 15 years of marriage, she had never directly refused one of his directives. Excuse me? I said no, Scarlett repeated, her voice stronger. I've made a commitment to this production. People are counting on me. I won't let them down. And what about your commitment to me? Nicholas demanded. To our marriage? Does that mean nothing? It means everything, Scarlett replied. But it shouldn't mean I have to erase myself, that I have to give up everything that makes me, me. Nicholas stared at her, as if seeing a stranger. This is ridiculous. You're a grown woman playing make-believe in some second-rate community production that no one will even see. The contempt in his voice crystallized something in Scarlett. People will see it, she said quietly. And more importantly, they'll see me. Not as your accessory, not as the perfect corporate wife, but as someone with talent and voice of her own. This isn't you, Nicholas insisted, gesturing dismissively. This is some midlife crisis fantasy. No, Scarlett countered, a lifetime of suppressed feelings suddenly finding words. This is me remembering who I was before I met you, before I started shrinking myself to fit the space you allowed me. Nicholas's face flushed with anger. I gave you everything. This house, security, status, things, Scarlett interrupted. You gave me things, but you took something far more valuable, my sense of self. The argument continued late into the evening, circling through accusations, justifications, and recriminations. Nicholas alternated between cold anger, bewildered hurt, and calculated reason, trying every approach that had worked to control Scarlett in the past. But something fundamental had shifted within her. With each attempt to make her abandon the play, her resolve only strengthened. Finally, Nicholas issued an ultimatum. If you go to that theater again, don't expect me to be here when you get back. Scarlett looked at her husband of 15 years. This man who had once seemed so commanding, so certain, whose approval she had craved. Now she saw something different. A man terrified of losing control, of having his carefully constructed world disrupted. That would be your choice, she said quietly, just as this is mine. For the next 2 days, an icy silence pervaded the house. Nicholas left early for work and returned late, barely acknowledging Scarlett's presence. She continued attending rehearsals, now openly marking them on the kitchen calendar. The approaching confrontation loomed over every interaction, yet Scarlett found herself strangely calm. Whatever happened with Nicholas, she would not abandon Amanda, or herself. 3 days before opening night, Nicholas's demeanor suddenly changed. He arrived home with flowers and an apologetic smile. I've been thinking, he said, as Scarlett arranged the roses in a vase. Maybe I overreacted about this play thing. Scarlett regarded him warily. Really? Yes, Nicholas said, loosening his tie. It's just a hobby, after all. Something to keep you occupied. I shouldn't have made such a big deal about it. He approached and placed his hands on her shoulders. I want to see your performance. Opening night. I'll be there. Relief washed through Scarlett, followed quickly by suspicion. This concession seemed too easy, too complete. What changed your mind? I talked to Gerald Davenport, Nicholas admitted. His wife was involved in community theater years ago. He said it was a phase, but it made her happier, more compliant at home. He smiled as if he'd paid her a compliment. If this little creative outlet makes you happy, then I support it, as long as it doesn't interfere with your real responsibilities. The words Little creative outlet and real responsibilities ignited a slow burn of anger in Scarlett's chest, but she maintained a neutral expression. Nicholas hadn't changed his perspective at all. He had simply recategorized her acting as a harmless diversion rather than a threat. He still didn't see her, the real her, the woman who was emerging from years of careful erasure. "Opening night is Friday at 8, she said, keeping her voice even. "I'll make sure they save you a good seat." The night of the performance arrived with a flutter of nerves and excitement. The cast gathered in the community center's small backstage area, applying makeup and running through last-minute line checks. Scarlett wore the vintage dress that costuming had found for Amanda, a once elegant piece that still retained traces of its former beauty, much like Amanda herself. Michael, adjusting his tie as Tom, stopped by her dressing area. "Ready to break a leg, Amanda Wingfield?" Scarlett smiled, touching the silver quill necklace she wore beneath her costume for luck. "As ready as I'll ever be." Bridget gathered the cast for a final pep talk. "Remember, this play isn't just about memory and illusion. It's about the human capacity for both destruction and tenderness. Every character is both victim and perpetrator, both fragile and strong." She squeezed Scarlett's hand. "Especially Amanda." From her position in the wings, Scarlett could see the auditorium filling up. The community center's modest theater space held about 200 seats, and nearly all were occupied. She scanned the crowd for Nicholas, finally spotting him in the third-row center, the premium seat she had reserved for him. His expression was neutral, his posture rigid, even in the casual setting. As the house lights dimmed and the soft opening music began, Scarlett closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, she was no longer Scarlett Lockhart, corporate wife and perfect hostess. She was Amanda Wingfield, faded Southern belle, abandoned wife, fierce mother bear protecting her cubs the only way she knew how. The performance flowed with an almost dreamlike quality. Scarlett moved through Amanda's world of gentleman callers and cotillion dresses, of desperate hopes and crushing disappointments, with complete immersion. When she delivered the monologue about her 17 suitors, the audience was utterly silent, captivated by the wistful longing in her voice, the graceful gestures that suggested the beautiful girl Amanda had once been. In the climactic scene, where Amanda appears dressed in her girlhood finery to greet the gentleman caller, Scarlett created a moment of heartbreaking vulnerability. Amanda's desperate attempt to recreate her past glory, to project an image of gentility and prosperity despite their poverty, resonated with a truth that transcended acting. Charm, grace, poise. That's not just a Southern tradition, it's a way of life, she proclaimed, her voice ringing with Amanda's desperate conviction. When the final scene concluded, and Tom delivered his closing monologue, Scarlett stood in the wings, tears streaming silently down her face, not from sadness, but from catharsis. She had done it. She had given voice to Amanda's desperation, her delusions, her fierce love, and in doing so, she had finally given voice to herself. The applause was thunderous for a community production. As the cast took their bows, Scarlett was startled by the audience rising to their feet when she stepped forward. Their faces blurred through her tears, but one remained in sharp focus. Nicholas, still seated, his expression unreadable even as those around him stood in appreciation. Backstage was a flurry of congratulations and emotional embraces. Bridget hugged Scarlett tightly, whispering, "I knew you had this in you from the first audition." Magnificent. Eventually, the cast emerged into the lobby to greet friends and family. Scarlett spotted Nicholas standing alone near the exit, stiff and formal in his expensive suit. She approached him with her heart pounding. "What did you think?" she asked, suddenly anxious for his approval despite everything. Nicholas studied her face, still flushed with emotion and performance adrenaline. "It was unexpected," he said finally. "You were very convincing as a desperate, delusional woman clinging to the past." The calculated cruelty of the comment struck Scarlett like a physical blow. Before she could respond, Bridget appeared at her side, champagne flutes in hand. "You must be Nicholas," she said, handing him a glass with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your wife is extraordinary." The reviewer from the local paper called her performance revelatory. He's doing a feature on her for Sunday's edition. Nicholas's expression flickered briefly before settling into his professional smile. How wonderful! Scarlett has always had a flair for the dramatic. "Not dramatic, authentic," came a new voice. Thomas Green, Nicholas's friend and colleague, approached with his wife. "Scarlett, that was incredible. I had no idea you were so talented." Nicholas stiffened, clearly surprised by Thomas's presence. "You came to this?" "Wouldn't have missed it," Thomas replied, his admiring gaze on Scarlett. "When I heard you were playing Amanda Wingfield, I had to see it. My mother was in a production years ago. It's my favorite Williams play." He turned to Nicholas with a puzzled expression. "I'm surprised you've never mentioned Scarlett's acting before. She's remarkable." A small crowd had gathered around Scarlett now, audience members requesting autographs on their programs, fellow cast members introducing their families, even the elderly director of the community center offering congratulations. Nicholas found himself pushed to the periphery, watching as his wife accepted praise with a grace and confidence he'd never seen before. When they finally left the theater, the night air was cool and fragrant with early spring blossoms. Scarlett suggested they walk home. Their house was just 8 blocks from the community center, but Nicholas insisted on driving the short distance. In the car, silence stretched between them until Nicholas finally spoke. "You made me look like a fool tonight." Scarlett turned to him, genuinely surprised. "What are you talking about?" "Thomas Green and his wife, Barbara Miller, the Hendersons, all these people I work with, watching my wife pretend to be some faded Southern belle with delusions of grandeur." His hands tightened on the steering wheel, "and then looking at me like they're wondering why I never mentioned your talent." "I wasn't pretending to be Amanda to embarrass you," Scarlett said quietly. "I was playing a character in a beautiful, important play." "A character who's pathetic," Nicholas snapped. "A woman who can't accept reality, who lives in her fantasies of the past." "That's not all Amanda is," Scarlett countered. "She's also incredibly strong. She was abandoned with 2 children during the Depression and somehow kept them fed and housed. Her methods might be misguided, but her love is real. Her determination is real." They pulled into the driveway, but neither made a move to exit the car. Nicholas turned to face her, his expression hard. "This needs to stop, Scarlett. The remaining performances, any future productions, all of it. I've been patient, but enough is enough." Something crystallized in Scarlett in that moment, a clarity she hadn't fully embraced until now. "No," she said simply. "No?" Nicholas repeated, as if the word were foreign. "No," Scarlett confirmed, her voice steady. "I won't stop. Not the remaining performances, not future productions if I'm cast, not any of it. This isn't a hobby or a phase or a midlife crisis. This is me remembering who I am." Nicholas's laugh was cold. "And who exactly do you think you are? Some undiscovered talent? A star trapped in a housewife's body?" He shook his head dismissively. "You're my wife. That's your role, one you've played perfectly until now." The casual cruelty of his words hung in the air between them. In the past, Scarlett might have retreated, apologized, compromised, but something had fundamentally changed within her, not just during tonight's performance, but over the weeks of rehearsal, of finding her voice, of being truly seen by others. "I heard you, you know," she said quietly, "that day in February, when your friends were over. I came home early and heard you tell them, 'I'm only beautiful in the dark when you can't see me.'" Nicholas had the grace to look startled, then uncomfortable. It was just a joke. Men talk that way sometimes. "So, it wasn't the words that hurt," Scarlett continued, her voice steady. "It was realizing they were true, Not about my appearance, but about me. The real me. You only want me visible in certain ways, only in the roles you've approved. Otherwise, I should remain in the dark. She opened her car door and stepped out into the night air, suddenly desperate to be anywhere but in that enclosed space with him. Nicholas followed, his face flushed with anger. "Where are you going? We're not finished discussing this." "Yes, we are," Scarlett replied, turning to face him on their perfectly manicured lawn. "I've spent 15 years becoming smaller, quieter, less myself to fit your expectations. I won't do it anymore." Nicholas stared at her, recognition finally dawning that something fundamental had shifted. "What are you saying? That you want a divorce? You'd throw away 15 years of marriage for some amateur theatrical hobby?" "Not for the play," Scarlett corrected him. "For me, for the chance to be fully alive again." She looked at their beautiful home, the life they had built together, and felt an unexpected surge of compassion for Nicholas. "I loved you. I still do in some ways, but I can't keep loving you at the expense of myself." Outing! Inside the house, Scarlett moved with calm purpose to their bedroom, pulling out a suitcase she had packed that morning, not with certainty that she would leave, but with the recognition that she needed to be prepared for all possibilities. Nicholas followed, watching in disbelief as she added her jewelry box and a framed photo of her parents. "This is insane," he said, his anger giving way to genuine bewilderment. "Where will you go? What will you live on? You haven't worked in 15 years. "I'll stay with Claire until I figure things out," Scarlett replied, zipping the suitcase closed. "She has a guest room and has already offered it if I needed it." "You planned this," Nicholas accused, hurt finally breaking through his controlled facade. "You've been planning to leave me." Scarlett paused, considering his words. "No," she said honestly. "I've been planning to find myself. I hoped you might be able to love the real me as much as you loved the version I created to please you. But I see now that's not possible." As she moved toward the door, suitcase in hand, Nicholas made one final attempt. "People will talk, Scarlett. My colleagues, our friends, they'll all know our marriage failed." Scarlett turned back, struck by the realization that even now, his primary concern was appearance, what others would think. "Yes," she agreed quietly, "they'll know. Just like they know now that I can act, that I have talent, that I'm more than just Nicholas Lockhart's perfectly dressed wife." His expression hardened again. "You'll regret this. When the excitement fades and reality sets in, when you're working some menial job because you have no real skills, living in some cramped apartment instead of this house, you'll realize what you threw away." For a moment, fear flickered through Scarlett. He wasn't entirely wrong. She had no recent work experience, limited resources of her own. The practical challenges ahead would be significant. But then she thought of Amanda Wingfield, abandoned and nearly destitute, yet still fighting fiercely for her future and her children's futures. If Amanda could face her harsh reality with determination and even occasional joy, so could Scarlett. "Maybe," she conceded, "but I'd rather regret my choices than regret never having made any." She picked up her suitcase and walked to the front door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "There are 3 more performances: Saturday evening, Sunday matinee, and the final show Sunday night. I hope you'll come, not for me, but to truly see me, maybe for the first time." Nicholas didn't respond, his silence answering more clearly than words could have. Scarlett nodded once, accepting this final confirmation of what she had already known, then stepped outside and closed the door behind her. The night air felt different somehow, fresher, full of possibility. As she placed her suitcase in the trunk of her car, Scarlett looked up at the stars visible even through the suburban light pollution. For a moment, she stood perfectly still, simply breathing, simply being. 2 months ago, she had heard her husband tell his friends she was only beautiful in the dark. Now, standing alone in the night, she finally understood the truth. Darkness had never been her enemy. It had been in darkness that she had begun to find herself again. In the shadows of theater wings, in the dim light of early morning solitude, in the quiet spaces between Nicholas's commanding presence. And now, as she prepared to drive away from 15 years of careful erasure, Scarlett realized that stepping into the unknown wasn't stepping into darkness at all. It was stepping into light, her own light, finally allowed to shine. The next evening, Scarlett arrived at the theater an hour before call time, needing the solitude of the empty stage to center herself. She stood in the ghost light's soft glow, running her hand along the painted furniture of the Wingfield apartment, touching the glass menagerie that represented Laura's fragile beauty. "I thought I might find you here early," came Bridget's voice from the shadows. The director emerged, carrying 2 cups of tea. She handed one to Scarlett. "Pre-performance ritual?" Scarlett accepted the cup gratefully. "Something like that. Everything feels different tonight." Bridget nodded, understanding in her eyes. First performance after a life-changing decision usually does. At Scarlett's surprised look, she smiled gently. "Claire called me. She wanted me to know you're staying with her for a while." "I'm sorry if this brings drama to the production," Scarlett began, but Bridget waved away her concern. "Theater thrives on drama, my dear. Besides, you are hardly the first actress to find her voice on stage, and then discover she needed that voice in her real life too." She touched Scarlett's arm gently. Tennessee Williams wrote that, "The world is violent and mercurial. It will have its way with you. We are saved only by love, love for each other, and the love that we pour into the art we feel compelled to share." As the audience filed in for the second performance, Scarlett peered through the curtain, scanning the seats for Nicholas. He wasn't in the seat she had reserved for him, nor anywhere else she could see. Disappointment mingled with relief. Perhaps it was better this way, to perform without his judgmental presence. Just as the house lights began to dim, movement at the back of the auditorium caught her eye. Nicholas slipped into a seat in the last row, his face partially shadowed. He had come, after all. This performance was different from opening night, deeper, more nuanced. Scarlett moved through Amanda's world with a new understanding of the character's strength, her resilience in the face of abandonment and financial insecurity. When she delivered the line, "I've had to put up a solitary battle all these years," her voice carried the weight of both Amanda's struggle and her own newly embraced independence. In the final scene, as the play's melancholy conclusion approached, Scarlett found herself unexpectedly emotional. Amanda's last moments, still deluded but undefeated, still clinging to hope despite everything, resonated with a truth that transcended the stage. As the lights dimmed on the Wingfield apartment for the last time, a single tear slid down Scarlett's cheek. Not for Amanda, but for all the women who find themselves trapped in beautiful cages, uncertain how to fly even when the door is finally opened. The applause was even more enthusiastic than on opening night. As the cast took their bows, Scarlett saw Nicholas rise from his seat and make his way to the exit before the lights came up fully. He had watched the entire performance, but couldn't bear to remain for the acknowledgement of her success. Even now, he could only see her in shadows. After the Sunday matinee, a local reporter interviewed the cast for the community paper. When asked what drew her to the role of Amanda, Scarlett considered carefully before answering. "Amanda Wingfield is often dismissed as delusional, controlling, even villainous," she said. "But I see her as profoundly human, a woman fighting desperately to create security in a world that offers her few options. Her methods may be misguided, but her courage is undeniable. She refuses to surrender to circumstances, refuses to become invisible." She smiled, a private acknowledgement of her own journey. "That's something I've come to admire greatly." The final performance, Sunday evening, was sold out. Word had spread about the production's quality, particularly Scarlett's portrayal of Amanda. As she applied her makeup in the small dressing area, Michael knocked gently on the doorframe. "Packed house," he said with a grin. And guess who's in the front row? The artistic director from Regional Theater Group. Bridget says he never comes to community productions. Scarlett's hands stilled on her powder brush. Really? Why now? Apparently, he read the review in this morning's paper. The one that called your performance a revelation of hidden depths in a character too often played as mere caricature. Michael's grin widened. Rumor has it, they're casting for their summer season. The news should have made Scarlett nervous, but instead, she felt a strange calm. Whatever happened tonight, whether the artistic director was impressed or not, whether future roles materialized or this remained her single moment of artistic fulfillment, she had already received the most important validation. She had rediscovered her own voice, her own worth, independent of anyone else's assessment. This final performance transcended all the others. Scarlett moved through Amanda's world with complete immersion, finding new layers of meaning in lines she had spoken dozens of times in rehearsal. When Amanda recalled her 17 gentlemen callers, Scarlett infused the monologue with a complex mixture of genuine nostalgia and self-aware performance, showing how Amanda used these memories as both shield and weapon against her harsh present reality. In the climactic scene with the gentleman caller, Scarlett revealed Amanda's vulnerability beneath her Southern charm offensive, the desperate hope in her eyes as she watched her daughter with Jim, the momentary belief that everything might work out after all, made her eventual disappointment all the more heartbreaking. As the play concluded, and Tom delivered his final monologue about memory and forgetting, Scarlett stood in the wings, tears streaming silently down her face, not from sadness, but from recognition of how far she had come, of how much further she had to go. The journey wouldn't be easy. Real life rarely offered the neat conclusions of theatrical productions, but she was ready for it, ready to step into the light of her own choosing. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. As Scarlett took her final bow, she saw Claire in the third row, applauding wildly with tears in her eyes. The artistic director from Regional Theater was indeed in the front row, nodding appreciatively. And in the very back, barely visible in the shadows, stood Nicholas, watching, finally seeing, perhaps understanding at last what he had tried so hard to extinguish. Later, as the cast celebrated at a nearby restaurant, Bridget raised a toast. To the glass menagerie, and to all of us who found pieces of ourselves within it. The artistic director approached their table, introducing himself to Scarlett with evident admiration. Your Amanda was extraordinary, he said. We're casting a streetcar named Desire for our summer season. Would you consider reading for Blanche Dubois? Scarlett felt a surge of excitement mingled with momentary doubt. Blanche, another of Williams's complex, wounded Southern women, clinging to illusions as protection against harsh reality. Could she do justice to such an iconic role? I'd be honored, she heard herself say, confidence returning. When are auditions? As the evening wound down, Scarlett stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The spring night was cool, but not cold, scented with flowering trees and possibility. She thought of Amanda Wingfield, of the line that had resonated so deeply with her. I've had to put up a solitary battle all these years. Her own battle was just beginning. The practical challenges of building a new life, of supporting herself, of navigating independence after 15 years of comfortable dependency. There would be difficult days ahead, moments of doubt and fear. But standing there beneath the stars, Scarlett felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. She recalled Nicholas's cruel words that had catalyzed her transformation. My wife only looks good one way, in the dark, when I can't see her. The irony wasn't lost on her. It had been in darkness, in the shadows he created, that she had finally found the courage to step into the light, to become visible, not just to others, but to herself. A week later, as Scarlett was settling into Claire's guest room that was slowly becoming her own space, a package arrived. Inside was a simple silver frame containing the newspaper review of The Glass Menagerie, with Scarlett's name highlighted. A note accompanied it in Bridget's distinctive handwriting. The most courageous act is still to think for yourself. Aloud. Coco Chanel. Beneath the review was a cast photo from the production. There was Scarlett as Amanda, standing tall in her faded but elegant dress, her eyes alight with a fire that had nothing to do with stage lighting and everything to do with reclaimed purpose. She placed the frame on her bedside table, a reminder not of what she had lost, but of what she had found. That night, preparing for bed in the quiet of her new temporary home, Scarlett caught her reflection in the mirror, no longer Nicholas's carefully maintained wife, but a woman in the process of becoming. The journey ahead was uncertain, the path unclear, but for the first time in 15 years, the woman looking back at her from the mirror was fully, gloriously visible. Not beautiful in spite of the light, but because of it. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.